IUCN, who's going to be presenting. My name is Mike. I'm a Sea Grant Fellow with the California Ocean Protection Council, and we also have Steve from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So first, I will hand it over to Dev to talk a little bit more about IUCN.
Thanks, Mike. Just want to check, and maybe just so you know, I have started recording. So we're recording this session.
Great.
And also, I think it's 5 of us, but there may be phone callers. I'm not sure. Do you?
I only see us 5, but yeah, only the 5 of us are on the attendee list for now. But we'll see if anybody dials in.
Okay. I just wonder if it's worth, if it's just the 5 of us, if it's worth waiting.
Yeah, somebody just called in here.
Okay.
So we at least have one person.
Steve Wertz did. I couldn't get in earlier, but now I'm on.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, I say, Mike, let's just give it maybe a couple more minutes, I think, just in case people are getting familiar with GoToMeeting, and sometimes there's a download and things like that. So.
Sure. You want to wait until it's 9:05? You want to wait until like 9:10?
Maybe
a couple more.
Or 9:07, maybe a couple more, just 2 more minutes. If that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, totally.
And it might be that you have few enough people that we could ask people just to introduce themselves, at least on the first webinar, Mike. I think there is someone dialing in by phone, and so we don't see their names.
Right. Yeah, I see them. So we have. Wait, is that Steve? Steve, did you have to dial in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Steve is caller 3. Looks like we have a couple more people popping on here. Give it another minute. Welcome, everybody. We're excited about this effort to add California's MPA network to the IUCN Green List of protected areas. And we're excited about this opportunity starting today to bring you guys, the ocean stakeholders of California, into this process. So my name is Mike Esgro. I work for the California Ocean Protection Council. I'll let our other 2 presenters introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dev Aiama. I'm with IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Good morning. Steve Wertz here, and I represent the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's MPA management program.
All right, so why don't I hand it off to Dev just to give a brief background on IUCN and the Green List program.
Great, thanks, Mike. As you're presenting, I'll just tell you perhaps when to change slides.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, great. So IUCN is a union, and we're actually celebrating our 70th anniversary. We are one of the oldest and most extensive environmental networks in the world. We're an international organization that's based, headquartered just outside of Geneva in Switzerland. I'm the community manager for the IUCN Green List, working in IUCN's Global Protected Areas program based here in IUCN headquarters in Switzerland. And we're really excited about California's interest in the IUCN Greenlist program. But before we get into the details of the Greenlist program, we thought we'd give you a quick idea of what IUCN is about. If you could move to the next one, Mike. Thanks. So we started in 1948, and we've been working, and we're perhaps best known for the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, which is a global database to assess the species extinction risk of species. It's a list that many conservationists are familiar with, and many governments around the world make reference to in order to establish national lists of protected species. We've also worked on climate change while flagging it as a major threat to nature and biodiversity as early as 1960. And moving through here some of the key milestones, a lot of our work is related to species conservation, but also protected area management. And some of you are likely familiar with IUCN protected area management categories 1 through 6, for example. We have been a leader in providing global conservation strategies, including promoting and advancing the concept of sustainable development, and from these global efforts also stimulating the creation of national conservation strategies. We are both an intergovernmental organization as well as a membership organization of non-governmental organizations as well. Next slide, please, Mike. So as a union, we have over 1,300 member organizations. This includes state governments and government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and indigenous peoples organizations. We also have 6 expert commissions. These are over 10,000 voluntary experts divided into different commissions dealing with species conservation, protected area management, social, environmental, economic policy, environmental education and communication. And we have a secretariat with over 900 staff based in about 50 countries. So we think of the union as a triple helix, like DNA, with members, commissions, and the secretariat working together to influence policy and working together on direct conservation action with direct benefits to people and nature. Increasingly, we are working around the sustainable development goals, particularly the ones that relate to nature and communities. I did think it's worth highlighting here that we have a rich membership in the USA with 119 member organizations. Out of this, we have 6 government representatives. So the US is a member of IUCN at a state level through the US Department of State, but also government agencies at a federal level. This is Fish and Wildlife, National Park Service, NOAA, USAID, US Department of Agriculture, 110 organizations that are from the non-governmental sector, and 3 indigenous peoples organizations. Next slide, please, Mike. Just to give you an idea, we are more than just protected areas and species conservation. We do work on other thematic areas, applying science and knowledge to inform global policy and conservation action at a field level. And this deals with environmental law, ecosystem management, climate change, gender issues, world heritage, water, and the various topics here, which I won't get into detail. And moving to the next slide. Quite a lot of what we do is informing and guiding global conventions such as the UN Convention on Biological Diversity is the main Rio Convention that we work on, but also working on the UN Convention on Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Increasingly, we are also framing this within the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And essentially, IUCN works in 3 main areas. Our heartland work is on valuing and conserving nature. This is where our work pertaining to species conservation sits, as well as our work on protected area management and the Green List program. We also work in a second strategic area around promoting and supporting effective and equitable governance of natural resources for the benefit, for the equitable benefit from nature for all, and about a third area around deploying nature-based solutions to address societal challenges such as climate change, food security, water security, or food insecurity and water insecurity rather, in terms of global societal challenges and promoting nature's role in contributing solutions to these challenges. Next slide, please, Mike. We have, as I mentioned earlier, just to wrap up about IUCN, we have a global presence. We're headquartered just outside of Geneva in Switzerland with 11 regional offices around the world that serve as regional hubs. And we have more than 50 country offices worldwide through which we implement projects in the field for direct conservation action, and through our regional and headquarter offices, we implement projects that influence policy both at a global and regional level. For more information about IUCN, on the last slide, Mike, please do visit our website and you can learn a lot more about it there, as well as our social media channels. So now we'll get into the Green List program. And the IUCN Green List program is a fairly new initiative coming out of IUCN that's recognizing that when conservation is done right, we know that it works, and it's trying to take IUCN in a direction that's also promoting optimistic solutions to our conservation challenges. So the red list is important in that it highlights the extinction risks to species, and there's also a red list of ecosystems that's being developed. But we also think we need to emphasize with complementary initiatives such as the Green List, which is about recognizing where conservation works, and this particularly can be done in area-based conservation. And the Green List program is about promoting effective protected area management that's delivering on successful conservation outcomes in specific protected and conserved areas around the world, applying equally to terrestrial and marine biomes. The areas are evaluated against a set of globally consistent criteria. This is the IUCN Green List Global Standard, which we'll be sharing some more details about that standard later in this presentation. But the standard sits at the heart of the program, and it's the standard that is implemented by protected and conserved areas, and then it is evaluated and in order to be admitted to the Green List. So a pilot phase was concluded in 2014, and over 20 protected areas were celebrated for achieving the Green List standard and being admitted to a pilot phase of the Green List. And we are now, since 2014, we've been incorporating lessons learned from the pilot phase, as well as improving the standard, and going through several rounds of public consultations and implementing some new governance systems. And we're now ready to scale up and open for business and welcoming new jurisdictions into the Green List program, of which California is one of the latest jurisdictions to express interest in the program.
So I'm going to jump in quickly from the state side and just talk a little bit about why we as Californians would want to join the Green List in the first place. First and foremost, the state and our partners see this as an opportunity to amplify stakeholder involvement in the Green List, or in the MPA management program. So this is really an opportunity to kind of increase awareness, increase ownership of what's really our system of MPAs. We are also excited about the opportunity to kind of provide a little bit of international, or a lot of international recognition for California's achievements in ocean management. The MPA network that we have is really a truly novel achievement. And being recognized in this way is going to help build support for ongoing best management practices in California. And also the entire process is going to help to serve as a check to kind of ensure success that our MPA network is meeting the goals of our founding legislation, which is the Marine Life Protection Act. And then, Dev, do you want to talk a little bit about the process here?
Yeah,
from the
sorry.
IUCN side?
Just have to remind myself to unmute. And yes, jumping into the process. So I mentioned that at the heart of the standard, at the heart of the program, rather, is a standard, and the way that the program is implemented is that sites make a voluntary commitment. So the green list standard is applicable to a diverse range of sites. This could be anything from a World Heritage Site or a national park to a state park or a community conserved area as well. So it's not just applicable to legally protected areas, it's also applicable to community conserved areas. Essentially any area that's spatially delimited and has conservation as one of its main objectives. The way it works is a site that commits to the green list, and the site then enters into a three-phase process. The first one is the application phase, in that the site has to provide evidence and information in order to meet the requirements of the first three components of the standard, dealing with good governance, sound design and planning, and effective management. And these are what we would, IUCN would call the foundational components or the key ingredients required for successful conservation. The site, once it furnishes this information, is then based on a decision by an evaluation group, is then admitted to the candidate phase of the program, and the site is evaluated against the full set of criteria. This means the fourth component of the standard is also evaluated, and this fourth component is around the demonstration of successful conservation outcomes. And once all of this information is evaluated and assessed to meet the global standard, the evaluation group will make a recommendation to admit the site to the green list. Now that's the third phase of the program, and the green list is not a permanent status. It's a certificate that's valid for 5 years, because we expect that the standard will also improve over time, but it's also a means through which to check that these sites are consistently performing at this high standard, and it's an opportunity to make sure that in case things have changed on the ground, that the program will be able to pick those up. So there's a midterm review around 2.5 to 3 years, and then a renewal review at the end of a 5-year period for the site to seek a renewal of its green list status. So the standard itself is a global standard that's 17 criteria, and these are evaluated, as I just mentioned, against these four components. So as I mentioned, in IUCN's experience, it's about putting together these key ingredients around governance, design and planning, and effective management that can create the right conditions to deliver on successful conservation outcomes. A lot of management effectiveness work focuses particularly on design and planning and the creation of effective management plans, but often management effectiveness evaluations are often missing the requirement to demonstrate successful conservation outcomes. So the Green List standard is also trying to address some of the gaps we've seen globally in our experience with management effectiveness of protected areas. If you could go to the next slide, please, Mike. Just to give you a quick overview of the standard. So the full standard is available at iucn.org/greenlist, but the standard is divided, as I mentioned, into 4 components split for a total of 17 criteria that are split across 4 components. So what you see on this slide, the text might be a bit small, but hopefully you can read it to get a sense of the types of criteria. Essentially, these criteria can be viewed as conditions that are required from these sites or protected and conserved areas to prove that they're meeting these conditions. So there's 3 conditions under good governance, 4 criteria under sound design and planning, and several more under effective management, and 3 more under successful conservation outcomes. So the standard is based on IUCN best practice. This is reflecting decades of experience of IUCN's work on publishing technical guidelines. You'll see here at the bottom of the slide some of our publications around the promoting best practice for governance of protected areas, guidelines of how to apply IUCN protected area management categories, some IUCN publications, this one in French on effective management. But it's also important to emphasize that it's not just about using IUCN tools. It's the Green List program kind of serves as a platform through which jurisdictions or areas that can if they're using tools that are providing information and are able to using tools that are able to meet the requirements of the standard, that's sufficient to be used in the Green List program. It's not just about using IUCN best practice, but recognizing where good practice is being implemented in protected and conserved areas. And so some of these, we are also using this platform as a means to create more awareness around some of IUCN's key knowledge products, such as the Red List for threatened species, which I'd mentioned earlier. We also have a new standard around recognizing key biodiversity areas around the world. We also have a platform called Protected Planet, which is the world database on protected areas and is the public-facing portal for green listed areas. So once areas get into the Green List program, once they're achieving the Green List standard, there will be a public summary of why these sites are being recognized by the Green List, and that'll be presented through Protected Planet.
Great. Thank you, Dev. So this is Mike from OPC again. We want to spend a little bit of time kind of going through these components and explaining what they are and how they're relevant to California. So first component, good governance, emphasizes basically fair representation and the involvement of all interested stakeholders, and also ensuring that any governance arrangements are clearly defined in advance, and that all processes around whatever the protected area is, that those are transparent, open, and again, involve stakeholders, and that there are clearly defined processes for addressing any issues that stakeholders may have with those areas. The good governance component also emphasizes that management should draw on best available knowledge. So whether that's science, marine ecology in our case, or socioeconomics, so social sciences, that we are using science to inform adaptive management. So management that takes into account recent advances in science, social sciences, et cetera. Here you guys can see there's a slide or a little graph here from a paper that was recently published in Nature describing the threats of climate change to marine protected areas worldwide. So the state is tasked with tracking developments like this and considering how they can be integrated into our existing management strategies. The second component, which is sound design and planning, refers not just to implementation, but also the plans that are in place for the long-term management of the site. So first, the site, and by site, remember we mean protected area, the site's major values are clearly defined. So whether that's natural resources, any ecosystem services that are provided, cultural resources that might be present, biodiversity priorities, and ideally all 4 of those are clearly outlined, and that the design of the protected area directly supports the conservation of those values. It's also important that any large or small scale threats to those values are well described, well understood, and also included in the management plan, and that social and economic consequences are taken into account in in protected area planning. So for marine protected areas in California, a big one for this, for example, would be the potential economic impact on fisheries. And now I will turn it over to Steve from the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Thanks, Mike. The third component, effective management, focuses on the need for long-term management strategy that takes into account both ecology and economics, the human dimension. And in California, the Marine Life Protection Act Master Plan for Marine Protected Areas provides for effective management to achieve the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act and the components of the Green List. Can you go to the next slide, Mike? The third component also emphasizes the need for effective on-the-ground enforcement of regulations and ensuring that resource use is managed effectively. It's important to remember that green listed areas are not necessarily reserves or no-take locations. The focus is to make sure the area is managed effectively. And finally, criteria 3.7 is particularly critical, and it states success must be defined and measurable and assessed through monitoring evaluation efforts, which we're going to hear more about in a moment from Mike.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so building off of that criterion 3.7, kind of how Dev was mentioning, those three components we just discussed create successful conservation outcomes. That's a requirement of being green listed. So the specific component says that there's a monitoring or evaluation program in place for the protected area that demonstrates that the site meets or exceeds its performance objectives for conservation. So I think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about what we've already been doing to track MPA performance in California and how we see this going forward long term. So the first most important thing that we've done is we've decided, the state and our partners, what are the performance indicators that are of interest to us. So if you check out these little cartoons over here on the side, you can see there's density and biomass as two critical performance indicators. Higher density of animals just means that there are more animals, so more sea life in a given area. Increases in biomass take into account not just the density, but also the size of those animals. And another thing that ecologists like to look at are the size frequency distributions, especially of species that are fished. So inside an MPA, do we see that the average size of a sheephead, for example, is bigger than the average size of a sheephead outside of an MPA? And then in terms of biodiversity priorities, the state has made the decision that really what we're looking at is healthy ecosystems. So a little bit of sciencey language here, but are all the key niches in that ecosystem filled? So are all the major groups that need to be present in order to have a healthy functioning ecosystem, are they present in the MPA? And in order to effectively track these performance indicators and assess how effective MPAs are, we need to have a effectively designed monitoring program. So what we've decided to do is we're going to track performance indicators inside and outside MPAs. So that makes sense, right? But we're also going to track performance indicators before and after MPA implementation. So the way that we've accomplished this is by going out when all the MPAs were established in each study region in California, we went out and surveyed the heck out of all those ecosystems so we could understand what the ecosystems looked like before the MPAs went in. So if you check out this graph, it's a little bit complicated, but all you really need to know is that red represents inside an MPA, and this is biomass that we're looking at. Blue represents outside an MPA. The dashed line in 2008, this is for the Channel Islands, is when the state marine protected areas were implemented. So we've got data from before, we've got data from after, we've got data from inside, we've got data from outside. And by tracking how things change over time and how things change in relation to each other spatially, we can get a really good idea of what these performance indicators are telling us. And I will throw it back to Dev to talk a little bit about evaluating California's MPAs.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So who evaluates these protected areas and makes the judgment call against the global standard? This is where we, as IUCN, convenes a group of experts, what we call the Expert Assessment Group for the Green List, or EAGL, who is a group of local experts, typically this could range in size from 5 to 15, 20 individuals, but typically we find there about 10 to 15 individuals, and these are experts that represent a diverse range of expertise relevant to the standards. So these are not just experts around effective management, species and habitat conservation, but also experts around governance and management of natural resources as well. The EAGL then reviews, goes through first a training process that IUCN conducts along with a training provider. And following, as part of that training, the EAGL, or this expert group, also has an opportunity to consider adapting the global standard to the local context. And that's where the 17 criteria, and I think it's on the, we'll give you a glimpse of what indicators underpin the 17 criteria on the next slide momentarily. But essentially there are about 3 indicators per each of these criteria. So there's a total of about 50 indicators that provide guidance to the protected areas in terms of what's the kind of information required to be able to demonstrate compliance with the conditions. There's an opportunity for the expert group to look at these indicators. There's a set of 50 globally applicable generic indicators that, if the group decides, would be better to adapt some of those indicators to the local, in this case, Californian context. There's an opportunity for the EAGL to do that, to make sure that these indicators are most relevant to the California context. And there's also then a requirement that these indicators go through a public consultation process to create awareness of the Green List program in the jurisdiction, so in this case California, and to get additional input and feedback on making sure that these indicators are really relevant to the California context. So once those adapted indicators are ready, the sites then provide material against those indicators, and the EAGL will then evaluate that information. This could be governance documents, scientific reports, minutes of stakeholder meetings, etc. And based on a group evaluation by the EAGL, based on consensus, the EAGL will make a recommendation to IUCN, and then there's a global IUCN Green List committee that's the final checkpoint, which is expected to basically follow the recommendations of the EAGL, and will then admit these sites to the Green List.
And I just wanted to jump in here and emphasize how much that the state wants stakeholders involved in this process. So the EAGL is not just going to be a group of expert scientists and high-level government people. This is going to be something that involves all of you, which is why we're trying to, cast this application out to as wide an audience as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I think we explain a little bit more about the EAGL process a bit later, or a few slides later, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So this just quickly to give you an idea of the structure. There's the if you look at this table, on the far left is the component around good governance. The criterion, it's not giving you the full language of the criterion. This is just the title around guaranteeing legitimacy and voice. And then there's indicators that get into a higher resolution in terms of what this actually means for the site. So maybe just looking at 1.1.3, the site's local governance structures and mechanisms recognize the legitimate rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And there are some sample means of verifiers, which gives you an idea of the kind of documents or evidence that would be provided by the site, and that which would then be evaluated by the EAGL. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on this.
No, I think we'll move on. I'll explain a little bit more about the process in a second. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, we want you to participate. We want the EAGL to be inclusive. We want it to reflect the diversity of the ocean stakeholders in California, including tribal governments, including fishermen, including divers, educators. We're viewing this as an opportunity for Californians broadly to actively participate in MPA management. So the first step is to apply. Please apply at opc.ca.gov. There will be a little news alert there that says California is seeking to join the IUCN Green List. And if you click on that news alert, you'll be taken to the application page where you can download the call for expressions of interest that has specific application instructions. The selection process is pretty straightforward. What we will need from you is a 250-word personal statement explaining how you meet the criteria for an EAGL member that are listed in that call. Also a resume or CV if you have it, and a self-evaluation of expertise, which is also included in that call letter. It's basically just a fillable PDF where you can check off of all the criteria that are required for EAGL members, how much experience do you have in each one of those. Submit applications to IUCN, so they don't come to the state, they go directly to IUCN, and there's a specific email address on that call letter by June 15th. So just a little bit under a month for you guys to get applications in. I did want to make the point here that OPC, CDFW, the state in general, can provide feedback on these applications. So we'll see the applications, we can provide comments, but the final decision regarding EAGL members who is selected is going to be up to IUCN, and they'll be working with an independent reviewer from Accreditation Services International to ensure that the selection process is fair, objective, includes everybody.
Mike, sorry,
yes.
Just to come in, I might just remove the optional requirement on the CV. Sorry, that might have been a misunderstanding in our requirements, but we do require a CV.
Do you require a CV?
Yes.
Okay.
A CV as well.
Then our mistake. Then a CV
no problem.
is required. All right. Good catch, Dev. So if you're selected to be a member of the EAGL, and again, there's going to be between 5 and 15 people, what is going to be the commitment? So first, in early August, there's going to be a 3-day training. We haven't nailed down exact dates for this because it involves international travel for the IUCN folks, but we're looking at maybe the first weekend in August in Sacramento, and we're going to do these on weekends so that you guys don't have to miss work. So probably start Friday evening, go through Sunday afternoon, so you'll miss as little work as possible. And then you're going to have 2 further 3-day meetings, also in Sacramento, also on the weekends. And this is going to be where you are going to be responsible for reviewing all of the documentation that the state has provided, demonstrating compliance with those criteria that Dev was discussing earlier. So that little, the indicator for inclusion of indigenous peoples, for example, will supply documentation that shows how we think that we're meeting that criteria, and it's up to you to make the decision whether or not you agree with that. There's also going to be site visits, probably 1 visit. We, again, have not nailed down the locations or the dates for those, but just something to be aware of. Also important to note that EAGL members are all volunteers, so unfortunately no one can compensate you for your time on this, but all of your travel expenses will be reimbursed. So why would you want to apply to join the EAGL in the first place? First and foremost, we see this as an opportunity for you to advance the effectiveness of MPA management in California and to really bring your personal and professional experience, whether that's in education, in science, in government, in scuba diving, ocean recreation, tribal government, whatever it is, to contribute to MPA management here in California. The EAGL is going to be a platform for the interests of your particular stakeholder group, but it's important that you know that you cannot directly represent any organization that you work for, that you're affiliated with. Also, becoming a member of the EAGL results in automatically being a member of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, which is a really cool opportunity to kind of become part of the growing global protected area community. Worldwide, both terrestrial and marine, the opportunity to network with some real interesting innovators in science and conservation and protected area management. So with that, I think we will say thank you and open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions, you can either type your questions in the chat window and we can read them to the group, or if you're calling in, you can unmute yourself and ask questions now. Anybody have any questions? All right. Well, if there are no questions right off the bat, feel free to email either myself or Tova, who also works for the Ocean Protection Council. Our emails are right here, and in the email where you found out about these webinars with the call letter attached to it, our emails are in there as well. So thank you guys so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing your application.
Mike, I was just wondering if I just wanted to add maybe just a couple of quick points on the EAGL. Just so people are aware also that the EAGL size will be limited in terms of the number of spots available. So it might be like 10 to 15 individuals. But so if there's a lot of interest in applications, there are also opportunities to be, for example, mentors of sites or also technical experts that the EAGL could call on. So even if we are going to be selecting out of the pool of applicants, but we're hoping that everyone that's expressing an interest can still be included in the Greenlist community.
Great. That's good to know. Thanks, Dev.
And Mike, I was also wondering, just in the interest of time, if it's worth just asking maybe people on the call just to if it's okay to just say quickly introduce themselves, or is that not something you would do and that's fine? But
no, that would be great. Yeah, that'd be great.
Just to get a sense